Hi, welcome to my kitchen. Tonight we're going to make tuna casserole. Before we get started, make sure your hair is tied back, your hands are washed, and an apron's on. First thing you want to do before you start any recipe is read the recipe thoroughly, make sure you understand each direction, and then make sure you have all the ingredients and tools you need. For tuna casserole, we need tuna. I have a 4-pack of tuna cans. You're going to need peas. If you don't like peas, you can leave them out. I'm using canned. You can use frozen. You can use fresh. You're going to need condensed cream of mushroom soup. If you prefer to use a dry mix, you can. If you make your own cream of anything, feel free to use that. You just need some sort of a cream-based soup to put into your mixture. We like to top everything with cheese, so I have a block 8 ounces, that's a half a pound. I have a block of sharp cheddar. You can use any cheddar, you could use a Gouda, any kind of cheese you want to put on top is fine. I have wide egg noodles. I have 2 bags of this because I'm going to make a large batch, so I'm going to be using 2 bags of egg noodles and 4 full cans of tuna. And then for fun, I like to top it with French fried onions. My Walmart was out of French fried onions, so we're going to try these salad topper onions instead. And they'll still give it the same crunch, and they're garlic pepper, so we're going to try those. Now, you're going to need a pot to boil your noodles in. I have a pasta pot. It's a 2-part with a drainer. It doesn't matter what type of pot, as long as it's big enough to hold your pasta when it starts boiling. If you've chosen to use a block of cheese, you're going to need a way to shred that. I'm going to use a box grater. You can use a handheld grater. You can use a food processor. And you're going to need a casserole dish. So this glass pan, this is a 9 by 13 casserole dish. This is safe to go in the oven. It can stand high temperatures, and I really do like the glass ones for baking things like this. So I'm actually going to probably need 2 9 by 13s with the amount of noodles I'm making. Those are the items we're going to need to make sure we get started. So you're going to check your ingredients and check your tools. You will need a spoon to stir with. Once you've got everything ready, it's time to get going. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is get our water boiling for our pasta. This is probably going to take the longest of anything else we need to do with this recipe. Simple enough to boil water, but we have to account for the timing. So we have our pot on the stove. I have the water in it, and I don't know if you can see, but the fill, I stopped down here. I did not go all the way up because when I add the noodles, it's going to displace the water. So if you think about when you get into the pool or get into the bathtub, when your body goes in, the water goes up. Same thing's going to happen with our noodles. So I don't want them to boil over past my seam. So I'm leaving my water a little lower than what I need. I can always top it off if I need to, but I don't want a mess and water boiling over onto my stove. So in addition to the water, I'm going to add a whole teaspoon of salt. I don't usually measure that with a measuring spoon. I usually would just do that by hand, but so we have an idea to share together, I'm using just a teaspoon of salt. It's going to be added right to my water. Now, when we want water to boil, we're going to get there a lot faster by covering it. So I'm going to close this up. I'm going to turn this burner on to high, and I'm going to get my water boiling. Now, I don't cook a lot of things on high, but getting water to a boil on high is absolutely fine. So this burner is on high. Okay, now that we have our pot of water on to boil, we're going to preheat our oven. We're going to preheat to 375. Okay, now tuna casserole is basically a dump it dish, meaning there's very little prep you have to do, especially if you buy your cheese already shredded, it's even easier. So it really is a dump it dish. Open your tuna with your can opener, open your peas with your can opener, open your cream of mushroom soup with your can opener, and you're going to basically mix all these with your cooked noodles. Now, is this the healthiest way to do this meal? No, not at all. We know the ingredients and the way these things are not really the best. However, It's a quick meal. It's a cheap meal. It's great to feed a lot of people. And sometimes that outweighs it. Absolutely, you can use better choice ingredients than this. You don't even have to use this kind of canned tuna. You can use fresh tuna if you wanted. Obviously, the items will get a little more pricey. The only one that I'm being particular with in this recipe, honestly, is the cheese. So I could have made this recipe a lot faster by buying a bag of shredded cheese and not needing to shred it myself. The reason I don't is because the shredded cheese does have a little bit of a powder coating to keep it from sticking together in the bag. That sometimes keeps it from melting as well. So if I were putting shredded cheese on a salad as a topping, I might go ahead and buy that pre-shredded. But when I'm putting it on something that I want it to melt really well, shredding it myself, even though it's going to take a couple of minutes, not even, is going to give me a better final result. So really, while I wait for that water to boil, all I need to do is get these cans opened, the water drained from my tuna, and my cheese shredded. All right, I did say drain the water from your tuna. We're also going to drain the liquid from the peas as well. So with your cans open, put the lid over the top, slide it back to make a little opening, hold it together, turn it, and dump the liquid out. Could you lose a pea or two? Sure. Can you use a colander? Absolutely, you can use a colander. Dump your peas in the colander and all your liquids out. It's an extra dish that I don't want to make, and I know the kids don't want to wash. So drain out the peas. And then the same thing with the tuna. Once you've already got the lid off, if you just turn it and dump it, you're going to lose all those flakies. So just leave the lid with just a tiny little gap. So it's just pressed in. So I've got it just opened on the back, just pressed in on the front, and drain the liquid. We don't have to sit here and try to get all of it out. A little bit's not going to hurt. It will actually thin our soup a little. Okay, so we're going to get all of our cans of tuna and our peas drained. All right, so when it comes to shredding the cheese, this is an 8-ounce block or a half pound. I don't know that I'm going to use this full 8 ounces on these casseroles. I really will know when I go to put it on what they look like. I know I won't use more than this. So I'm going to go ahead and shred this whole block. And if I have some to put away, that's fine. And you can always decide when you're putting the cheese on your dish how much you want. Now, when we're going to shred it, I am using the box shredder, box grater. We'll look at it. It'll have different sides. It has a flat side. Okay, that's looked at as the base. I personally am going to turn it and put the whole side down so I have more landscape to work with as a base. It's a little more solid. It really isn't very good on this plate. I'm going to switch that out for I switched that plate out for a cutting board. I didn't like that one as my choice here. So I've got it flat on this cutting board. Instead of using it this way and grating down this surface, I now can hold it against the flat cutting board to use the same surface. So when we're using a box grater, if you haven't used one before, one side you can see it's got a sharp cutting edge and the other side is kind of like your safety edge. So when you're looking at it, you want to be going against the cutting edge. And it is sharp. It is designed to cut. So watch your fingers. Lay your box grater down. Take your piece of cheese and you're simply going to shred across. Okay? It doesn't take very long at all. And by doing it on its side like this, we're collecting all the cheese in there ready to go. And all we're going to have to do is just dump it into our dish. Now, if we're going to sprinkle it on top, you can dump it in your hand and sprinkle it. But it really doesn't take much time at all to shred a block of cheese versus buying it pre-shredded. And it's going to melt so much better for you without that extra coating on it. So I'm going to go ahead and shred all this. And if we use it all, we use it all. If we don't, we have some for something else. Now, while I'm still waiting for that water to boil, I'm going to go ahead and take advantage and get the sauce base mixed in my casserole dish. It's a lot easier to put my other ingredients in and then fold my noodles than it will be to pour the ingredients over my noodles and try to mix them in. So I have one casserole dish here. I am going to split this into two based on how much noodles I have. So into the casserole dish, I'm going to put half of my 1 pound 10 ounce, so my big jar of condensed soup. If I were using 2 cans of soup, one into one pan, one into the other. Measurements don't have to be precise. I'm not going to weigh this out. I'm just going to put about half of this in here. So I have about half that soup in here. I'm going to do the same thing, about half these peas. And then 2 of my cans of tuna. All right, now we're just going to mix this together. Nothing fancy here. I'm just getting it mixed. It'll be a lot easier to put my noodles in. If you want to add seasonings, now is the time to do this. What seasonings go in tuna casserole? Really, whatever you like, whatever your family likes. Pretty much everything I cook is going to be salt, pepper, garlic, onion at least. So I am going to go in on this dish with, we like a lot of garlic, so I'm going to go into here with 1 teaspoon of garlic. Okay, so that'll be 1 into each of my halves. And 1 teaspoon of onion powder. You can absolutely make this a much fancier dish, a much more robust dish by dicing your onions and cooking your garlic, cutting your garlic, cooking your garlic into a butter sauce, something. This is a dump and go dinner. This is a fast dinner. We're using onion powder, garlic powder. Okay, I am going to go ahead with a little bit of chili powder. Now, seasonings are up to you and what your family likes. So I'm just going to put a 1/4 teaspoon of chili powder in here. Okay, whatever you like in your house is what you're going to use. We're going to stir this up. And remember, we are going to be putting these French fried onions, and I did get a garlic pepper flavored French fried onions. So I might be using here a little less seasonings than I would. And then we're going to go in with our salt. And I'm going to say that's about a 1/2 teaspoon. You absolutely can measure it. I'm trying to cut back our salt. And this pepper mill is almost out of pepper, but I'm going to crack pepper into here. If you like a lot, crack a lot. If you don't like a lot, don't use as much. I'm just kind of covering the surface. There isn't a right or wrong amount. Go by what your family will eat. You want to put something else in here, you want some parsley, whatever you want, go ahead and season it how you and your family will eat it. At least salt and pepper we need in here, okay? So that's it. Now I'm really done until my noodles are done. All right, at this point we are just waiting for our water to boil. Now, just because we see it getting hot, it's not necessarily boiling. If you look, you can see teeny tiny little bubbles. That is not a boil yet. We're still going to wait. We see lots of little bubbles, rapid little bubbles. That's still not a boil. All right, now we have boiling water. Rapid, large bubbles. So now we're going to go ahead and get our egg noodles added right to our pot. Okay. I'm going to stir in this before I add more. I'm going to stir these down into that water. Now, once this water has It's come down in temperature just a little bit from adding the noodles. So you see our bubbling, our boiling stop. Once this starts to boil, it is going to come up and come right back over these noodles. So don't worry that they're just a little at the very tip top. What I don't want is water boiling out of my pot. So we probably could have about another 2 ounces of water. Really don't need much more. This is going to return to a boil, and then we're going to start counting how long we have our noodles in here. All right, this has now returned to a boil. We can see it boiling all around the outside of our noodles. So a quick stir. I'm going to cover it, and I'm going to leave it just at a little bit of an angle, just a little gap. Steam's going to help it to cook, but in this pot, if I don't leave a little gap, this is going to boil over on me. So I'm leaving just a little bit of a gap. All right, so now my noodles are boiling, and I did turn this down to medium high from high, which I didn't mention earlier. I've got my casserole dish with half of my toppings. I have another, this is a cake pan, not a casserole dish. Notice it's not glass. All of my casserole dishes are in the fridge with desserts in them. So I'm doing the other half in a cake pan. You can see they're basically the same size. Not my preferred, definitely my preferred. Now, when I put these noodles back in to boil, I waited until they came up to a boil to start timing them. We want to time them for 7 to 9 minutes. And if you will take your container that your noodles come in and find your instructions, what they tell you is to add to the pasta to the water and then return them to a boil. Then we're going to boil according to the time. So if we just put them in and start timing, they may not be done as soon as the time is finished. So you return it to a boil. I am about to boil over here. Taking my lid off calms that down. So we return it to a boil, and then we start counting our 7 to 9 minutes. All right, once your pasta has finished cooking, you're going to drain it. You can use a colander and pour it through the colander, or I have a pasta pot. So it has 2 pieces to it, the outside pot that the water's in, and an inside that lifts up and drains. Once we have our noodles cooked, you're going to drain them and give them a little bit of a shake, get all that extra water out. Once they're good and drained, we're going to return them and put them into our casseroles. All right, and we're just about done putting this together. So we're going to take half of our boiled noodles and put them into each of these 2 pans. And again, it doesn't have to be totally precise. We're eyeballing about half. Okay, once these are in, now we're going to mix this in. So we're just going to kind of push and fold all of our sauce to mix in to our noodles. This is so much easier to mix the sauce ahead like we did than it is to attempt to put the noodles and then mix everything on top of them. I don't want to over mix my noodles and break them up too much either. So by having already put my soup and my peas and my tuna and all my seasonings and gotten those well mixed, now I'm kind of just coating all these noodles with all that sauce. Okay, so if you like it with more sauce than this, you can use more soup mix. You could use a cream of chicken if you wanted instead of a cream of mushroom. Basically, you're going to make these your own. For my kids that have been asking me for recipes, this is why it takes me so long to give them to you, because I really don't have anything written down and I'm just eyeballing as I go. So there, that's pretty well mixed in. Going to do the other one. And I think I said earlier that I put a half teaspoon of salt. I did not put a half teaspoon of salt. I put a quarter teaspoon of salt, the amount that I put in my hand to put into the mix. That would have been a quarter teaspoon. If I said a half teaspoon, I don't mean to have said that. So here we go. We are pretty well mixed. I don't really see any noodles that don't have sauce. I don't really see any puddles of sauce that don't have noodles. I'm just kind of getting them all mixed in. And then we're evening them out in the pan. Don't have to be exactly perfect. Evening them out. Okay. Now we're going to come through with the good stuff. So next, I'm going to come through with the cheese that I shredded earlier. And I'm just going to sprinkle it over the top. However much you want. You want them super cheesy? Make them super cheesy. You don't want them as cheesy? You don't want cheese at all? You don't have to use it. Colby Jack would work nice here. A pepper jack might even be good if you like spicier. So those look good to me. I'm not using, oh, I almost did. I might as well. Might as well more cheese. Okay, so that is the whole 8-ounce block. So figure about 4 ounces per casserole. And then I've got my French fried, not French fried onions, crispy onions. They're made for a salad. My French fried onions, they were out of stock on. So same thing, I'm just going to kind of sprinkle these over about evenly over the 2 of them. So I'm doing 1 handful on one handful on the other. Not going to measure, just going to simply eyeball it by going back and forth a little bit on each one. Okay, these are ready to go. They're going in the oven, and they're going in the oven maybe about 10 minutes or so. Everything in here is already fully cooked. All we're doing is melting our cheese and melding our flavors together. So about 10 minutes or so, but you're going to put them in the oven. Just keep an eye on them. So my cheese is sufficiently melted. I have these out of the oven. I don't want my onions to burn, and I don't want my noodles to dry out. So I've gone ahead and taken it out as soon as my cheese got ooey gooey and melted. You can see we've got ooey gooey cheese, nothing too brown, and we don't have dry noodles. So this is ready for serving.